One of the most common video editing tasks is cutting voiceover. Now maybe because it's not quite as glamorous as editing an action blockbuster, it seems to be a bit of a neglected art. That's about to change. In this section of the training, you'll see not only how to edit voiceover faster than real time, but also learn how to use a unique cocktail of audio effects to automatically eliminate breathy pauses while adding presence. First, open the Editing VoiceOver project. VoiceOver should really be recorded in a dedicated sound studio or a whisper room. Now, the reality is that not a lot of video productions have access to that kind of space.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the
result is bleed noise from outside the recording room and typically fan noise from air conditioners, computer chassis, and hard drives. Let's start by dealing with background noise. If you're only dealing with 30 seconds or so of voiceover, the best solution is probably to cut and edit away unwanted regions of the voiceover. But if you're talking about a half hour or more of voiceover, that kind of labor-intensive workflow will blow through even the most generous of budgets. Enter the noise gate. The noise gate is a magic effect that automatically eliminates sounds below a certain level of volume. It's essentially the reverse of a compressor. Instead of boosting quiet sounds to even out the dynamics of a sound source, it actually cuts the quiet sounds entirely, allowing only loud sounds through. It's called a gate for a reason. When your audio is quiet, the gate's closed, meaning that absolutely no sounds pass through. When the audio is loud, the gate opens, allowing sound through at its regular volume. Like the compressor, it has a few simple but important controls. Select the voiceover clip in the timeline, open the effects browser, and select the Levels category. Double-click a noise gate to add it to the voiceover. In the Audio Inspector, click to open the noise gate's HUD. The most important control here is the threshold. The threshold determines how loud a noise needs to be to trigger the noise gate. Until a sound triggers the gate, the output will be completely silent. With the clip selected, we'll use / to play through the clip and adjust the threshold so that it correctly triggers at the start of any voiceover phrase.
home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the purpose of.
Next, we need to adjust the release. The release determines how long it takes to close the gate once the sound is dropped below the threshold.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the purpose of committing a crime against the occupants, such as robbery, assault.
Think of it like an audio fade-out. Set the release time too short, and you'll end up clipping the tail end of certain syllables like S's. Set it too long, and you'll end up including some of the background noise you're trying to remove. So adjust until you get a nice balance between hearing the tails of your words without picking up unwanted sound. You want attacks set as short as possible so to avoid missing out on the very first part of a new vocal phrase. In fact, Final Cut Pro's noise gate includes a look-ahead function. Look-ahead will add a slight delay to the signal to allow it to trigger the gate before the loud sound actually arrives. Use this to guarantee you don't lose any quiet preceding sounds in the vocal phrasing. The full look-ahead of 20 milliseconds will often produce good results.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a.
There are a couple of other controls here worth mentioning. The hold control allows you to set a delay which keeps the gate open after the audio has fallen below the threshold again. This can sometimes be useful if you hear awkward silences between drawn-out phrases in the voiceover, but often a generous release will take care of this. And then there's hysteresis. Hysteresis is simply a second threshold to trigger the release of the gate. By default, it's set to -3 dB, which means the gate won't close until its signal is 3 decibels lower than the original threshold. Once you've set threshold and release, listen back to a lengthy section of the voiceover to make sure you're happy. If you hear awkward silences between some phrases, try adding some hold time. You should find that when set correctly, the noise gate will work well for all voiceover recorded during the same session under the same conditions. With the noise taken care of, you can now add some compression and EQ. Watch the lesson on those topics for more information.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the...
And sometimes a touch of small room reverb can also help to expand the sounds of the voiceover.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the purpose of committing a crime against the occupants, such as robbery, assault, with violent intent for the purpose of committing a crime against the occupants, such as robbery, assault, or kidnapping.
Let's finish with a quick tip on how to edit voiceover faster than real time. When voiceover artists make mistakes, most often they keep repeating a section of the voiceover until they get it right. Now, you could listen through the entire recording until you hear the right take.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the...
But when you have an hour of voiceover to edit, that could be a day of work. The solution is to watch the waveforms. In the case of the voiceover we're looking at here, we have the same phrase repeated multiple times.
With violent.
Paying attention to the shape of the waveforms, you can quickly see where a given phrase starts over. So rather than auditioning each phrase, just press B to access the blade tool. Blade just before the first instance of the phrase, and then blade again before the final instance, which should be the correct version. Press delete to perform a ripple delete of the offending section.
Home invasion is the act of illegally entering a private and occupied dwelling with violent intent for the purpose of committing a crime against the occupants, such as robbery, assault, or kidnapping.